when you open the door for somebody else.
Welcome back to the vaccine conversation in the early morning with Melissa and Dr. Bob. It is just after sunrise.
Yes.
And I saw a rainbow on the way in. Took
cool.
a picture.
Cool.
Yeah, at a stoplight while I was safely not moving, everybody. So we're here a little early this morning because with busy schedules and Dr. Bob's extensive traveling, sometimes we have to do it to make it work. And I had to sneak out of the house before my 3-year-old saw me because, as many of you will totally get, if they see you and know that you're leaving, it's much worse than if they didn't see you. And I'll be back, not too long from now. But I threw on my knockoff Uggs, the ones from Costco.
Cheryl loves those.
I would never pay Ugg prices for boots that you just lounge in.
I'm in my flip-flops as usual.
God, it's so cold out, though. Why? Why flip-flops?
I don't know.
I was like sweatshirt and I didn't have time for a matcha. I didn't have time for anything. This is like my water right here is going to be the first thing that I drink today.
So this is you at 7 a.m. with no makeup.
Well, I have just a little bit, so I didn't.
Did you brush your hair?
I sort of did, but like not very well. And have a rubber band in case it starts to look crazy after a while.
Well, it's okay to not put on makeup. If you have to do this at 7 a.m. I know you do it for yourself. You don't do it for.
I definitely don't do it for you. But if I'm like going out, I mean, there are people looking in cars. You never know. No, I just don't want to look hideous. Like it's like I have a 5-minute routine, and then I have my 25-minute routine. There are only two options. 25-minute routine is like when I'm going somewhere. 5 minutes is like. Makes a big difference for me, though. It goes from I'm a thriller, somebody on the video Thriller, or I'm somebody that doesn't scare you. So
I have a 5-minute routine and a 5-minute routine. Yes.
Which one of those routines do you comb your hair? Which one does that happen in?
Yes, in the 5-minute routine.
5-minute A or 5-minute B? Both?
Yeah, I think just A. Well, sometimes I don't. But,
no.
It's so funny. I mean, I think, I don't know if women know this, but men think that women who you're married to, who you love, or whatever, with no makeup, we think that's probably when you're the most beautiful.
Sometimes.
And I think for the most part. But I think girls don't get that.
No. Women know. Listen, we know the difference of when you wake up with that morning fresh dew face and you're just look so young and innocent and sweet and it's working for you. We know that. There's a difference between that and the whole why are my dark circles so dark this morning? Or I look like I haven't slept in 3 weeks, or what happened to my hair last night or something. There's a difference because I'm with you. There are some times where it doesn't have to be much, but those are usually the times when you're not going to see anybody that you look so great. I've had those moments when I looked in the mirror, first woke up, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go natural today.
Dang, look at me.
I'm looking good. And then no joke, within 10 minutes of being out in the world, I catch myself in a reflection and I'm like, no, why did I do this to myself? And of course I don't have anything with me. And I'm thinking what was I thinking? And sometimes it only looks good in certain contained environments.
I wonder if any of our listeners who have, who are very mature and have been around for a long time.
Not like me.
But who are very wise. I wonder if any of our listeners send us a message if you come from the day where you're a wife and you would wake up at 4 a.m, put on a mask, put your hair in curlers, go back to bed for an hour, wake up at 5, wash it all off, do your hair, put on your makeup, get back in bed, and then wake up at 6 with your husband and you're all done
no, first of all, nobody puts a mask on for an hour. That would dry your skin out. But no, I used to see TV shows like that. And
I wonder, was that real?
I
Did
don't
people
know.
actually really do that?
I can't. I mean, the thing is at some point, would your husband never see you after you shower? I mean, with no makeup on, there are certain things, other times that would be, it's not like you can't fool him for so long, but maybe those were the days when you didn't really know your husband that well before you got married. Really, that was happening back then. People didn't really know him that well, so you didn't want to. I say put all the cards on the table at the beginning. Show all the bad stuff, and I don't mean just looks. I mean on both sides.
Yeah.
All the things need to be out there on the table, so you know you're in it for the long haul.
Yeah.
That's my advice.
Well, today's topic is relationships.
So, having said that, let's talk about diseases from 6 months to the end of childhood.
Yeah, today's topic is
your relationship with the vaccine schedule from 6 months on.
And should you put makeup on before you go to your pediatrician, or just show up in sweats?
Or do you need makeup to cover adverse events?
Oh, yes. Right. See, there was a segue.
Yeah, we
there.
bring it together.
Yeah, this is the long-awaited for, much anticipated, and incredibly exciting discussion. I'm like bouncing in my seat.
I finally saw a review with you saying, "Dr. Bob, don't say it's boring." I was so thrilled to see that. Like, finally.
Yeah.
Finally. Speaking of reviews, can I just say briefly?
Oh, yeah.
We had a lot of really great new reviews on Immunity Education Facebook page. I think maybe because I mentioned it on the podcast, and I'm so happy that you guys did that. It just so happens with that surge of positivity, Facebook censorship took another step forward, and we just got a notification today that our page on Facebook, our nonprofit page that has only data-based information from the CDC or state public health departments or peer-reviewed medical and scientific literature. I just want to clarify, that's what's on our page. There are no personal opinions on our page. There's nothing shared from some random third-party website with personal opinions. Every single thing we have ever posted on that page from its inception has been completely scientific and data-based, as well as our website. This morning, we got a notification that we are now restricted because our page shares and spreads false information about vaccines. So they have decided it's quote unquote false because it does not line up with the narrative for the traditional medical establishment, which is vaccines are safe and effective all the time for everyone. So because we do not align with that completely, and because we're raising questions and we're bringing other information to the surface, they have literally said that we will have a reduced outreach, reduced distribution. We are not able to fundraise, which we haven't been able to do for months, by the way. And by fundraise, that means like run Facebook ads that let people know about this or suggest it to other people that might have similar interests. And that just happened this morning. So I sort of feel the timing is a little interesting. I feel like the timing might have something to do with, one, the surge of all these positive reviews that come in and are boosting the page and giving it positive analytics.
Yeah.
And then maybe on the heels of the Hollywood Walk of Fame thing that has gotten quite a bit of spread on that. And my page was one of the ones that had kind of caught on to that. That was, you never know. Like, and of course, Dorit, I don't know how to say her name, but she wrote back to me on Twitter. Yeah. And then her and all the bazillion super, super pro mandate trolls came on there with a fury. Sometimes I wonder when you go off on somebody's radar, they lash out and they want to do something. And I've seen the same names that pop up. When the same names pop up, all of a sudden something happens. All of a sudden you're shadow banned on your page, which means you're posting things, but it's not going to anybody's news feeds. And now this. So I think this is a type of punishment. This is like Oh, you think you're going to raise information about this? Like, we are going to lash out and this is going to be your consequence. That's what it feels like to me, is like, well, we'll just stop this right here. Yeah. Even though this is complete censorship and it's completely wrong. Yeah. And I did request a review, for those who are wondering. Yeah. And,
Mark Zuckerberg just testified again in front of Congress maybe 3 weeks ago. Again, he had done it, last year or earlier this year, but just recently again. I watched it because I was kind of interested. And he basically says, as an organization, they're not stopping people from posting, right? But as an organization, they have no obligation to support the spread of free speech for everybody. I don't know if those are exact words. I'm paraphrasing, and especially as they see misleading and false information about vaccines, as an organization, they don't have a legal or ethical obligation to like support that information spreading. So they said they have every right to this kind of censorship.
But of course, the question becomes, what's false and misleading? It's false and misleading just because it doesn't agree with you, not because it's wrong, not because it's factually wrong. Like this is all true information. Just because it doesn't help support what the opinion that you have, that is not the same thing as like protecting people from danger. This is what they say, right? This is some kind of health threat, global health threat, and there's this misinformation and how dangerous this is. And it's like, listen, this is just information from the CDC and scientific community. This is just information that's not being given on the news, but it's still true, factual information.
Yeah. And I think people are looking for alternatives to Facebook, and so I think Facebook is losing some credibility, kind of like Wikipedia lost credibility a long time
Snopes.
ago. Yeah, and so I feel like maybe there will be an alternative, platform for people to use.
I mean, I think all our listeners can understand that anytime you feel the need to censor information, anytime you have to silence people from having a discussion with factual information, anytime that happens, you have to ask yourself, why? What is this because of? What are you trying to hide? What information don't you want people to know? Every single thing that we have ever put out, you guys, is directly from the scientific community, or like I said, state departments of public health, or from the CDC. There has never been anything in our content that has not been sourced from one of those places.
Right. And I love how you showed me the Facebook notification gave you some examples of false information, like vaccines cause autism and all these other things, and none of those examples were from our page.
Right.
They had to just pull up other
yours,
examples.
But this is an example of what would get somebody restricted in this thing, and this is a big deal. Yeah, my
Dr. Bob Sears page was restricted a long time ago. I was kind of surprised that IEG was not restricted. I'm kind of surprised it took them this long, given their stance on shutting down neutral vaccine information sites now.
And, there is something to be said. We should be aware of this, and listeners, you should be aware of this, that we know iTunes is connected to some of this, not directly through Facebook, but I've heard myself, and they've talked about things like this. We know we are not being suggested on iTunes anywhere. And if you don't type in exactly letter for letter, what our podcast title is, you will not find us at all. Okay. Even with the kind of reach that we have, which we know is pretty good, especially for this topic. There is a chance that maybe this won't, last on iTunes as well. We've seen people write 1-star reviews that were from that side saying this should be pulled down immediately. This is dangerous, whatever. Yeah. So we need to be prepared for how to keep this conversation going in the future. And listeners, just keep an eye out for that. There might be some adjustments needed to be made over time so that we can keep having this conversation, because clearly they don't want us to. And even though we have, tens of thousands of people every week that do want to have this conversation.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep having it. And if we can't do it over the airways, we'll do it in person. So, yeah. Well,
that's the next episode.
I know. Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
Okay. Don't be.
So diseases, you guys.
Sorry.
So way back in season 1.
Sorry. It's early. It's not because of what you're about to talk about. I'm just waking up. I'm really hyped for this. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. Start again.
So in season 1, we did basically the first 9 diseases that vaccines are targeted against on the schedule, and we covered those 9 diseases in kind of a part 1. And I thought I would get to part 2 really quickly, but I know. But other things came up, and so this is basically part 2 of that, it's the remaining, what's 16 minus 9, 7, the remaining 7 diseases.
Even in the morning, you can do math, Dr. Bob.
I know.
Wow.
Yep, I do it all. Speaking of
Wait,
doing
put the calculator away, by the way.
Speaking of doing it all, I am updating our resources page on the new website.
Thank
I figured
goodness.
out how to do that, like how
From
to
35 on, you mean?
yeah.
episode 35.
So I've added like 10 more episodes. I'm adding more. So the resource page on our actual immunityed.org website, you go to the podcast page, you will find those resources there once again pretty soon. I'm not done. Anyway, I was just impressed with myself that I could figure that out because I'm very multi-talented. You're not impressed. Yeah.
I'm not.
Yeah. Excuse me. Okay. So you guys, the 7 diseases, this is basically what we vaccinate against, like for babies 1 year and older. All right. We did 9 months and younger, now it's 1 year and older. And these diseases are measles, mumps, rubella, chickenpox, hepatitis A, meningococcal disease, and HPV. Those are basically the ones that we give, later on the schedule. So, the whole purpose, after all this laughing and having fun, the whole purpose of this kind of episode is to equip you guys just with a basic knowledge of these things, but also for new listeners or for people who just kind of want to get their feet wet with give me an hour of the basics of something. This is one of those episodes. So if you are, a
Did
person,
you say an hour?
I know. I say it's not going to be an hour. Yeah.
Did you mean 30 minutes? I think you're overestimating because you're very excited.
Exactly. But yeah, this is what the kind of episode you would share with newbies out there, and so they can get information. So I guess we'll just jump right into this excitement.
Please.
Can you?
There's nothing I want more.
I love how much more fun this is than it could be.
And you're
right?
officially awake.
I am.
It
I'm
doesn't
awake
matter
now.
that it's early.
So measles is the first one, and we give the measles and the MMR vaccine, measles, mumps, rubella. We give that vaccine at 1 year of age and 5 years of age. Some countries actually give it at 1 year and 15 months or 1 year and 18 months. They do the booster sooner. Now that we have listeners in lots of different countries, so we're going to refer to that.
92, in fact.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Countries.
Yeah. So they give the booster sooner to cover that, 5% or so who don't get positive antibodies from the first dose.
And there are some countries that don't start it until 15 months.
Right.
And
15
later.
or 18
We're going
months.
to have a global episode
yeah,
on vaccine schedules because we've been asked about that a lot too.
But so because we've already done a whole measles episode, we're not going to totally go way in depth on measles because, we did an entire dedicated one to that, as well as meningococcal disease. But just to cover the basics, it's basically, you get, you should know how to identify it so that you help, prevent outbreaks if your family's involved in measles. And it's basically fever, runny nose, cough, and red eyes. The red eyes are sort of one thing that distinguishes it from just like the flu.
Conjunctivitis.
Yeah, conjunctivitis. Oh, thank you, Melissa.
You can call me Dr. Melissa from now.
Well, if I said, cough, fever, and rash and conjunctivitis,
right.
People would be like, you would have said, for those of you in the audience,
that's right.
red
And that's
eyes.
what I'm here for. But if you're going to keep it simple, I'm going to come and bring it hard hitting for you.
Right. So my staff is trained. Basically, if someone calls and say my kid has a fever and a cough or runny nose, because you will not have a rash yet, so you won't know it's measles. If we hear that fourth thing, red eyes, then I'm seeing you in the parking lot. I'm not seeing you inside my office because I want to, help it not spread around. So those are the symptoms. And after you've had those symptoms for about 4 days, you will then get the rash. And you'll just go online and look at pictures of the rash. I'm not going to explain it, but it kind of starts on the head, moves down to the body, and then moves out to the extremities. And then, you have the rash for maybe 4-ish days, roughly. And then, the fever, you have fever as well. And then that all goes away. And, you diagnose it basically either by seeing someone with the rash, but nowadays no one ever just takes the appearance of the rash as a confirmation of diagnosis. You will get like a nasal swab. They'll put like a nasal swab up down your nose and get some secretions from back there. They'll run it. They get like a fast result on that. You can test it by doing a blood test, but the nasal swab is the best. That is the best treatment or the best diagnosis. Treatment, the only known treatment is high dose vitamin A, which we talked about that in the episode. Measles, for the most part, it's a benign childhood disease for 999. Is that right? 999 out of every 1,000 people that catch measles. It's generally just a routine disease. And then there is a fatality rate of about 1 in 10,000 cases among children. And then if you're really sick and you go to the hospital, and you're like sick enough to kind of see a doctor, which most people are not, then the fatality rate is about 1 in 1,000. Like if you've kind of felt sick enough to seek medical care, those studies show 1 in 1,000 fatality rate. But if you include all cases, most of whom stay home, the fatality rate is 1 in 10,000. And that's why you see the discrepancy in the numbers from time to time in the media. We're fortunate no children have died of measles in the U.S. since 2002. Some people will get pneumonia. It's a rare complication. Some people will get an ear infection or diarrhea. So I think, again, this is just simple versions of these diseases, you guys. And, in my office, I've seen, 3 or 4 cases of measles over the years. It's pretty easy to identify for me now that I'm kind of familiar with it. None of my patients have ever had any complications. I mean, I haven't had a single problem from it.
Even with your patient base, you're the one that you should be having diseases running rampant.
I know. And that's what I always say to my patients. I'm like, if anybody should be seeing these diseases and should be seeing kids harmed and hospitalized for disease, it should be me.
It should be you, because your population is going to be more partially vaccinated or unvaccinated. You should be the one that's able to see what it would look like. Right. A small world of what it would look like if everybody stopped vaccinating. It would look like, what you're seeing.
Like my patients. Yeah.
And yet.
Yeah, my patients they're all so incredibly healthy. And so I think when you compare the, we've done a whole episode on the MMR vaccine when we did measles. I think when you compare the risk of your child's going to catch the disease and suffer a severe complication versus the risk of getting the vaccine and suffering a severe reaction to the vaccine, it's interesting. I mean, the vaccine causes seizures in 1 in 3,000 people, or some people even believe it's as many as 1 in 500 people will get a seizure from the vaccine. We know the vaccine has a high rate of causing arthritis reactions in women, especially lifelong rheumatoid arthritis. You can get bleeding disorders. You can get allergic reactions. So I would venture to say statistically, and we'll also, given the fact that we've had about 100 fatal VAERS reports from this vaccine in the last 20 years, statistically, if you just look at the numbers, you're statistically more likely to be harmed by the vaccine than you are to be harmed by the disease.
And of course, that's only what was reported.
Right.
Because often we know that doctors might not put that connection together.
Yeah, there's more reactions than is reported. But this only applies to the United States, like a modern country where we barely have measles and everyone's healthy and well-nourished and not deficient in vitamin A. Yeah, statistically, you're more likely to be that kid that has the seizure or the allergic reaction or arthritis reaction to this vaccine than you are to be the kid who catches measles and suffers harm from the disease. So that's disease number 1. That's how we're going to sort of run down these. The mumps part of this triple vaccine. I've seen some mumps too, which is it's kind of an interesting disease. Mumps also is a virus like measles. It causes fever, sore throat. And the thing that distinguishes it from other fevers and sore throats is that you'll get swollen cheek glands. And doctors were trained to kind of, tell the difference. Basically, the mumps swelling happens above your jawline. So it's like in your cheek above your jawline. And it's
not lower where you
Right.
see swollen glands. So that's a way
exactly,
to distinguish.
Yeah. So there's always a distinct difference between above the jawline for mumps and below the jawline for tonsil infections and swollen glands. And then it's in front of the ear as well. It's basically in front of the ear above the jaw. And that's where mumps infects you, because mumps infects the parotid gland. It's your salivary gland, and that's where it is, and that's where you get swollen. You'll usually have both sides swollen, all right, both cheeks. And you'll have fever, and you might have a rash as well. And I've probably seen more kids with a parotid gland infection on one side that was not mumps than I've seen with kids that actually was mumps. Right. So you can get a swollen parotid gland, but if it's on one side, it's probably not mumps. Mumps is not nearly as contagious as measles. It doesn't pass around as much. We mainly see it in college age kids in outbreaks. There's roughly maybe around 5,000 cases of mumps in our country every year. And no one dies of mumps. It's not a fatal disease. They actually have data on that. Back when mumps was like everywhere, and a lot of people caught mumps, it used to be fatal in about 1 out of every 2 million people in our population. So it's an incredibly low fatality rate. It's not a disease that you have to fear. But what do people fear about mumps? Do you know kind of the common sterility, right?
Hey, I'm 2 for 2. Dr. Melissa's in the house.
But that's how they get you, isn't it? They make you scared to death of sterility.
But isn't that ironic? Because of what we've seen with HPV vaccine.
Oh, yeah.
It's ironic that they can promote fear of sterility in one particular thing and then completely ignore that it is a potential side effect or adverse event with a vaccine that's targeting another illness on the childhood schedule. It's just, it's funny that they can pick and choose which things we need to be scared about.
Yeah.
I find that really...
And we get to pick and choose which things we believe that they tell us.
Right.
So sterility and deafness, that's also a very, very rare complication. So these complications, again, they're incredibly rare. They're really not a realistic risk. Like to me, it's not something that you should think is so likely that you should vaccinate based on that reason. I think, if you're going to vaccinate, it's just based on you want mumps protection in general. There's no mumps. There's no treatment. There's no treatment for mumps. And it is diagnosed with a blood test, right? But honestly, mumps is the kind of infection you don't really need to confirm with a test because it's so apparent with the swollen, both cheeks are swelling. So, but you know what? Most people will go their whole life never being around mumps. So the mumps vaccine, it's linked in with the MMR vaccine. So all the, same side effects, are true for the mumps part of the vaccine. But interestingly, the mumps part of the vaccine can cause sterility and can cause deafness and can cause the same disease complications that the mumps infection can cause.
And isn't that true for vaccines that contain these things?
Yeah. It's
Same
true
with
for the measles
yeah.
part of the vaccine and the rubella part of the vaccine.
Anything you can get from the actual virus, you can also get from the vaccine because it has portions of the
especially
virus.
live.
Yeah,
especially
live
virus vaccines. Yeah. Okay, so that's mumps. Am I going fast enough for you?
You're going good. You're
okay.
doing well.
So rubella. Rubella. So, I have not seen rubella because it's a disease that has been eliminated from the United States for a very long time. We might, for many, many years now, we've had less than 5 cases a year in our country. And it's also known as German measles. And it's a virus that causes a fever, rash. The rash apparently is kind of somewhat characteristic, but I couldn't even tell you what it looks like because I've never seen it. But what's kind of stands out about rubella is you usually will have some joint pain. Like kids will be, complaining of aches. But this is very indistinguishable from many, fever, rash, achiness diseases. So I think most doctors are not going to see rubella and know it's rubella unless you are an older doctor. back when everyone used to, when rubella used to be everywhere, they had about one fatality for every 9 million people in the United States. And the one worry about rubella is it can cause birth defects if a pregnant woman catches it. And interestingly, the rate of rubella birth defects was 1 in 20,000 pregnancies way back when rubella was everywhere. And the reason the birth defects were so rare back then was, Melissa, do you think?
I'm sorry, were you talking? Just kidding. Don't give me a bad review. I was just joking, guys. The reason that birth defects were so rare
back then from rubella
was because all of these women had already caught it as children, and therefore they were not getting it during pregnancy because they were immune for life. Correct. What do I get? Woo! You guys, this is exciting. Like, I was not even paying attention at all. That was just I'm literally posting about our censorship right now and reading people's responses.
I am very impressed.
I know. Well,
you had to replay it in your mind.
I was the law of deductive reasoning here. This is just putting these things together, guys.
So
it's
funny,
called thinking. I can do that even in the morning.
So for the most part, rubella is a very completely 100% harmless disease. If a child were to catch it, you're not gonna feel very sick from it. It's not gonna have any complications. There's no treatment.
Can I interject one thing about rubella? I've had people message me and say, I got blood work done during my pregnancy, and it shows that's the only thing I still have titers to. And I was, vaccinated as a child. And so either that's one of the components that lasts a little longer than everything else, or from what I've heard from people that have never even been vaccinated, they have titers to rubella without even their parents ever remembering that they had anything, because oftentimes this specific illness can be very mild and can be one of those things that you don't recognize as anything else. It's not It's not so characteristic.
Right.
There's a chance that you might have actually been exposed to the wild infection. Maybe, obviously once you do the first time, you're not going to have it the second time, but you'll be exposed without knowing, because it can be a lot more mild than something like the measles, even though it's the German measles.
Yeah.
So keep in mind that there's a chance that if you have titers to it, you can have those titers without having been vaccinated and without even remembering that you had this infection, because you might have had antibody boosts, throughout time just from being exposed. So that's probably the only one that I would say that that's true for, because the other things are so noticeable that you would definitely know. But this tends to be a little more mild from what I've seen.
Yeah, and this is the disease that pregnant women are tested for to see if you do have that immunity, and if you don't have that immunity, they'll want to give you an MMR vaccine in the hospital the day your baby's born, so that you will hopefully have immunity with your next pregnancy. And women should be warned that when a woman gets an MMR vaccine, it's actually the rubella component of it that causes arthritis. 1 in 4 women will suffer very painful arthritis. 1 in 4, you guys, will have arthritis. And then an unknown percentage of those will go on to develop lifelong chronic rheumatoid arthritis. And so for me, that vaccine is not worth getting as an adult woman because of that risk. You're better off just living with the rubella risk. Since we've eliminated it from the United States, you're almost guaranteed you won't come across that disease as a pregnant woman. And then you also won't have rheumatoid arthritis.
So then I hear a lot of people say, well, it's eliminated because of the vaccine, right? So
it doesn't mean you have to keep doing it.
So that's the thing. I think that's the argument I think people keep forgetting.
Yeah.
So let's just say it was completely eliminated totally due to a vaccine that was used in wide circulation for decades. Yeah. Okay, so now we're at a new place. We're at a new place now. It doesn't matter if the vaccine was responsible for it then. The question is, what is the cost-benefit analysis for it now?
Yeah, exactly.
In your life now,
Yeah.
what things do we need to have now? This is not an argument about whether or not vaccines ever stopped a case of disease at any time in history,
Right.
which I've just recently heard that this week. Oh, well, if we no longer have these, in fact, it was a review about you saying, you talk about the low prevalence of all these diseases, and they're saying, well, no kidding, that's because of the vaccines. Like, and they thought that was like a dig.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it doesn't matter if some of those are because of the vaccines and their use.
Right.
The point is we are where we are now. And if there is no prevalence of a certain disease, why are we mass vaccinating every single child without questioning anything like medical history and all the and genetic susceptibility? We're just going through and adding all these doses. It has to be about what's prevalent now. So if rubella is not something that's prevalent now, you're saying, what is the reason to take the risk as an adult to be revaccinated with MMR when there's not a likelihood of you catching rubella at all?
Right.
And that's, I think, a fair conversation to have.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sorry. Okay. So the next disease again. So this is MMR. You're getting the dose when you're 1 and when you're 5. You're also getting a chickenpox vaccine dose on the same visit, 1 and age 5 years, along with the MMR. In fact, you can also get MMR chickenpox all in the same syringe because they make it that way. But don't do that because your risk of having a seizure from that combined MMR chickenpox vaccine is like 1 in 1250. Like 1 in 1,250 kids will have. I love how I'm looking at you and you're like verifying.
That's right. Well, that's triple. It's about triple the risk.
Yeah, you're the numbers person. So don't get the brand that has MMR chickenpox together. And the reason that is they have to put 10 times the amount of chickenpox virus in that combined formulation, because the MMR viruses interfere with the chickenpox viruses. So they need to like overload the solution with chickenpox so enough is active when it's injected into you. So, and that might be why there's a lot more seizure. So, I mean, chickenpox, I don't know that I have to dwell on it that much because, well, I don't know, maybe the younger generation
it's going to be the new
doesn't
measles
know. Yes,
in
yeah.
10, 20 years.
Yeah, so basically, well, I'll tell you. Basically, chickenpox, you will have a fever, kind of feel achy, and you'll get a few little blisters. Blisters, on maybe your face, your upper body. That's usually where you get the first blisters, and they'll kind of be filled with little clear yellowish fluid. And you don't really know it's chickenpox yet. You're just kind of like, hey, what's going on? Then the next day, you will have probably a few dozen spots, like new blisters. And the blisters you had the first day will have opened and drained. So it's just like a little like oozing kind of little spot. And then the third day, you'll be covered in a couple hundred, they'll start with blisteries and then the some from the second day will have opened and some from your first day will now be scabbed over. So that's when I'm seeing the kids in the office. And we always tell kids, if you think you have chickenpox, don't come in until day 3 or 4. Because then we'll be able to know.
Otherwise, it could be all sorts of other little things.
Yeah, and I'll never forget this patient. I wonder if she's a listener. I don't know if she'll remember herself. But like 18 years ago, when I was a pediatrician in the office, and is back when we were taking insurance and we were taking this HMO insurance, and someone called and said, my kid has one spot. I need to know if it's chickenpox. And we told her, don't come in later. And she insisted. So she came and I saw her and I said, well, yeah, that looks like a chickenpox spot, but we don't know yet for sure. We'll know in a couple of days. She was so angry that I couldn't confirm it was chickenpox that she refused to pay her $10 copay because I don't know what I'm doing. And
oh my God.
Yeah, so she became that patient. I've had about 3 of those patients in my lifetime, and we.
So was it chickenpox? The world wants to know. You don't know because she never followed up, and that was the end of her.
She didn't come back. And so then basically, I mean, you might. I think the things to watch out for with chickenpox. Well, first of all, let me say you do want to go into the doctor's office or basically the parking lot and get it confirmed. You want it written down in a medical record by a doctor because that's how you can later verify immunity if it's in a medical record. So even though you don't need any medical treatment for this, you do want to have the diagnosis confirmed. That's one thing. Then the other thing, the things to watch out for. Number one of the very uncommon complications. I've never seen it. I've probably seen, I don't know, 200 or 300 cases of chickenpox, in my career. I've never seen anyone have a complication. Pneumonia is like one of those rare complications. So,
so you're saying that there's a chance pneumonia can happen as a rare complication of chickenpox.
right, exactly. Yeah. So if you develop a bad
But you've not seen it?
cough,
You've not
I
seen it?
haven't seen it. Yeah. So if you develop a bad cough during chickenpox, you for sure want to go see a doctor, right, to have it looked at. If any of your spots look really angry, infected, like really red surrounding it, and it starts to drain like pus instead of clear fluid,
So glad I haven't had breakfast yet this morning.
then you want to see a doctor. And if you get a chickenpox in your eye, that can be another problem. Because if you get an eye infection inside your eye from the chickenpox, then that can be serious. So that you can treat with antiviral eye drops. For the most part, chickenpox is never really treated with medication. There is a prescription you can take that can help kill the virus off faster, but that's not really recommended. It's not recommended. And I used to do that more, but I don't really do that much anymore because it's a very strong antiviral medication. So for the most part, it just is going to run its natural course. The fatality rate is about 1 out of every 65,000 cases is what the fatality rate is.
And when was that data from?
Well, that was back when everyone caught chickenpox.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I think using even those statistics, even though that's all that we have, is not really even realistic to what things would be today. You know what I mean? It feels like the numbers would even be lower than that today.
Yeah.
Because this was still 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah. And I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that. But so basically, the chickenpox vaccine, the main side effects are you can actually get chickenpox from the vaccine because it's a live virus vaccine. Rarely you can get a bleeding disorder, from the chickenpox vaccine. I've actually seen that twice, which is really strange that I've seen. I mean, not very many of my patients even get chickenpox vaccine. I mean, honestly, growing up, before this California law, I probably had, 200 or 300 patients that wanted chickenpox vaccine, 2 of them hospitalized with low platelet bleeding disorder as a complication. So that can happen. Seizures, you can get febrile seizures from the vaccine as well. So I think the risk benefit analysis for my patients, for the most part, almost no one opted in for the chickenpox vaccine until the new law passed. And then a lot of people are getting it. I'd say this is one disease where there is advantage of catching the disease and developing lifelong immunity. The challenge with lifelong immunity for chickenpox is it's dependent on re-exposure. Right. So if you my 3 boys caught chickenpox, and so they'll have a lot of immunity for many years. But if they're never exposed to children with chickenpox when they're adults, their immunity might actually wear off.
Right, because it doesn't last forever.
Yeah, but it might. In a lot of people, it can last forever, but it's better if you're re-exposed to your own children catching chickenpox.
So you were,
exactly.
And that gave you...
And I'm exposed to it in the office all the time, so I'm totally immune. So I'd say if you are an adult who caught chickenpox, or if you have kids who caught chickenpox, they might want to, take that into account, that as adults, they might actually, want their kids to catch chickenpox, so that they can, help with their own immunity.
And this is the big chickenpox shingles thing that we haven't done our episode on yet. That is kind of like the conundrum with wiping it out has now made this huge epidemic of shingles in younger populations and older populations. And that it's exactly for that reason that you're saying, is because you need that reboost to keep you protected from shingles also. Right. But we'll talk about that in another episode.
Yeah. And then older people can get a shingles booster. There's a lot of potential severe side effects to that, very concerning side effects. And so I'm not a pediatrician, so I don't give old people vaccines. But
you're not a pediatrician?
Did I say that? Oh my gosh. It's early. I haven't drinking much of my coffee.
Did you say drinking?
Yeah.
Write this one down. Edit.
No, I'll leave that in. It's fun times. You
are a pediatrician.
Yes, I am a pediatrician, so
you're
I don't
not
give...
a general practitioner.
Right,
so
right. But I know the data show that there are some very concerning side effects in the elderly, and so they need to really take that into account. their risk of, but again, all the elderly population, they all had chickenpox. They all caught it.
But they haven't been receiving boosts in the last 30 years.
Yeah, but some of them are, some of them aren't. So you look at your individual case. So all our listeners, if you have grandparents, and like if you as an adult listener had chickenpox, that means your parent was exposed to you and got boosted, and they can get a blood test to check their titer. Yeah, get a blood test before you get the elderly dose of the vaccine. And anyway, so hepatitis A is the next disease. We actually give that vaccine on the same day that we give MMR and chickenpox vaccine. Hepatitis A, it's a virus that infects the liver. It is a completely harmless, benign disease to almost every child who catches it. Basically, it's like a form of mild food poisoning. So most young kids who catch hepatitis A, you catch it like from food, from eating like street food in a third world country, or if a restaurant worker in the United States has hepatitis A and they don't know it, and they're handling your food improperly, you can get hepatitis A from a restaurant here in the U.S. I've seen maybe 2 cases of this in all of my career, so very mild cases, because we had a restaurant outbreak in San Clemente like 15 years ago. Anyway, so you basically, if you're a young child, you probably won't even have any symptoms at all. It's such a benign disease, you won't even know you have it when you're young. If you're an older child, like elementary, junior high, high school, you possibly will have like a mild stomach flu, maybe a little bit of vomiting, maybe some diarrhea. If you're an adult who catches hepatitis A, you'll have the worst food poisoning of your life. You can throw up for days. You'll turn yellow because your liver's inflamed. You'll have weeks of diarrhea. It's definitely not a fun disease to catch as an adult. And that's why we had fatalities in the homeless population of San Diego last year during an outbreak. If you're homeless, your liver's unhealthy already, you're malnourished, you don't have good access to health care. So if you go through this,
alcoholism. And
alcoholism, for sure. And so that population, hepatitis A is a very bad disease, but for the general healthy child and adult population, it's a harmless disease. It takes about 4 weeks to feel sick after you've been exposed. So if you're traveling and you're exposed to hepatitis A during like foreign travel, you're not even going to get sick probably until you're back here in the U.S. where you have better access to health care.
And you can spread it to other people.
yeah, exactly. No. So because you're not going to know you have hepatitis A unless you turn yellow. And so by the time that happens, you're spreading it around. It's spread by going to the bathroom and, not washing your hands. And so it's on your hands and you spread around to people that way.
This whole episode has been very appetizing, by the way. I hope nobody's going to be listening to this while they're eting.
That's so funny. So you get a dose when you're 1 year old and you get a dose when you are 1.5 or 2. It's like an age range for that second dose, 1.5 or 2. I've barely given this vaccine in my office, barely at all, because it's not required for school yet, and because it's a harmless disease, most of my patients have never wanted it. So this vaccine actually also has a risk of febrile seizure. They actually found this very strangely high rate of febrile seizures in the initial safety testing. So that's funny. You combine that with MMR and chickenpox vaccine, boom, febrile seizure. So that's hepatitis A. We basically finished all the young childhood doses of vaccines, and then you're going to get, you're getting these vaccines at age 1, 18 months. You're getting hepatitis A. You're also getting boosted from all your infant vaccines that we talked about in the other episode. At age 5, you're getting MMR, chickenpox, and DTP and polio again. And then there's this long break where you're only recommended to get the flu shot between age 5 and 12 every year. So then you hit age 12, and then there's a whole new round of vaccines. And so a little, transition into that age group. You're getting a Tdap booster, which is tetanus, diphtheria, whooping cough. We're not going to talk about that because we kind of touched on that before. But it sort of is a little pertinent. I mean, the 12-year-old Tdap booster, the whole reason they do that is they found everyone loses their immunity to whooping cough from their childhood doses by the time they're 12. And so they give them a booster, but they found it only lasts like 2 years. And it doesn't prevent the spread of the disease. It only makes your symptoms more mild when you do catch the cough. So there's very limited benefit to that 12-year-old booster. Yeah, you also get tetanus booster from that dose, but all your tetanus shots you had when you were younger are still, somewhat active anyway. So the need for that 12-year-old booster is pretty low, I would say. I don't consider it very important. But moving on to the two other 12-year-old doses. One is meningococcal disease. We had that episode already. I would encourage you, if you're a new listener and you really want to kind of the full scoop on meningococcal disease, go back to season 1 and listen to that episode. Or it might have been season 2. I think it was season 1.
Season 1, yeah.
Because it's worthwhile knowing the pros and cons with your teenager about getting that vaccine. But basically, meningococcal is bacterial meningitis. It's the kind that causes the spots on your body. They're called petechiae, and they're like little red dots that don't blanch. So if you start getting these, non-blanching, meaning they don't disappear when you stretch them, when you stretch your skin, they stay dark red or purple. You get those spreading around your hands and feet on your body. That's a very serious sign, along with fever and stiff neck, the painful back of the neck, severe headache, the lights hurt your eyes, you're throwing up. Those are all the symptoms of meningitis. And if it's along with that rash, that's very serious. It's a life-threatening emergency if you catch this disease. We're fortunate that it's a very uncommon disease. We have about 2,000 cases every year in our whole country. Many of those are kind of just like sporadically, in kids throughout the country. We don't really have large outbreaks of this disease because it's actually not very contagious, which again, we're fortunate about. The outbreaks that really make the news that you hear about are the college outbreaks, but these are only like 2, 3, 4 cases on a college, sometimes even only one case. We have about 250 children die of this disease every year, very tragically. And then in college ages, the numbers vary. Sometimes there's only about 20 fatalities in a year. Really bad years, sometimes there have been 50 fatalities, but for the most part, there's only 10 to 20 fatalities. So if you want to think of your high schooler or college age kids' risk of catching this disease, it's a very low risk. But it's a horrible disease to catch. It is treatable with antibiotics. If you catch it in time, you get hospitalized, get on IV antibiotics. And but the fatality rate, I forget the actual number, but the fatality rate is something like 1 in 10, 10% or 20% of teenagers who catch this meningitis. It can be fatal. So it's very potentially severe. And what else about meningococcal? Oh yeah, well, you get a dose when you're 12 and you get a booster when you're 16. They approved the 12-year-old dose, but then they were finding it was wearing off. So they approved a booster dose at age 16 because it was wearing off. But if you wait until you're 16 to get the one dose, then you don't need a booster. They found out the vaccine works better if you give it to 16-year-olds and older versus giving it like at age 12 and then again at age 16. So if you're wanting this protection just for later high school and college, and that's when we see most cases of this disease in older kids, then just get the dose at 16. And don't bother with both doses, and you'll have that protection, in high school and college. There are some potentially severe neurological reactions to this vaccine, like Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a paralysis. You can get nerve injuries. So this vaccine is known for some side effects. I think the risk-benefit ratio, I kind of see it might be kind of like a neutral or even. I mean, the disease is terrible. Fortunately, it's very rare. The vaccine actually doesn't have it doesn't have a lot of really strange ingredients. It's one of the kind of the vaccines that I don't know, is kind of maybe a cleaner profile from ingredient standpoint. It can have severe neurological reactions that are pretty rare. So like both risks are rare in this case. The vaccine side effect risk and the disease risk, they're both rare. So you kind of got to choose your risk, I guess, so to speak. I mean, if you're a family that totally has always opted out of vaccines and you are, very confident that you'd rather raise your kids naturally, then, I wouldn't say this is the one vaccine you should choose. I'm not saying that. But I think that the risk-benefit ratio is different than, say, the MMR vaccine risk-benefit ratio or, the whooping cough vaccine risk-benefit ratio. I think this one is kind of more even-sided both ways. So any questions about meningococcal disease?
No, I will go back and revisit season 1's episode for more detailed information. Thank you.
So the final vaccine, HPV.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
No, I was just excited to get to HPV because we haven't talked about it yet.
Yes.
Not because it was the last one on the list.
That's fine. Are we
Not
over
at
the
all.
half hour mark? We have gone an hour.
Oh, my God.
Yes.
No wonder.
So, and, I will say we're not going to talk much about this vaccine today because that needs 2 episodes itself.
Maybe 3.
We will get to that. In a nutshell, though, or a couple of nutshells, you get, it's so funny. I've never even given this vaccine in my office. So trying to think, you give it when kids turn 12. It's actually approved for as young as 9,
right.
but it used to be a 3-dose series at age 12. So at age 12, you get the Tdap, you get meningococcal, you get the first HPV. You come back like a month or 2 later for the second HPV, and then you come back like 6 months later or a year later for the third HPV. It's a 3-dose series. Well, lo and behold, a lot of the most severe reactions to this 3-dose series were happening after the second dose. And they thought it was because it was being given so soon after the first dose. So what they did is instead of admitting that a lot of people were suffering very severe reactions to this vaccine, they eliminated the second dose. So now you get the first dose, and they recommend you wait 6 to 12 months to get the second dose. And they're hoping that's going to cut down on the reactions. But they didn't tell us that's why they made the change. They said they made the change because, wow, we're doing everyone a favor. We figured out 2 doses works just as well as 3 doses. So we're going to just cut down to 2 doses.
You know what's interesting? So when I was at the National Vaccine Conference in Oahu, we went into the conference.
Yeah.
And I spoke to somebody there who was working at a booth promoting the HPV vaccine. And now in Hawaii, that is mandatory for school entrance. And so what she said to me, I said, I heard that they are now just down to 2 doses, not 3. Is that right? And she said, only for ages 9 to 14.
Yes.
She said from ages 15 to, she goes, and how exciting. It's now been approved to up to 45 years old. That's what she said. They're really, really, really pushing HPV. It was in a lot of the actual conference discussions. It was in a lot of their pamphlets and material. It was all about HPV.
And because it prevents cancer, and how can you possibly want your child to catch cancer?
And I think there's so much pushback in Hawaii for this already that because it's already passed a law, it's due to be implemented next year, that they are trying to get the medical professionals all on board with promoting this because they're trying to make this the new normal. So she said from age 15 to 45, you're still recommended to get the 3 doses.
Yeah.
But from 9 to 14, they're saying there was no difference in antibody response from 2 doses to 3 doses. And as we know, there were 10 years prior that they were giving that third extra dose before they realized this, which makes you wonder how much testing they really did on this before they unleashed it to everybody.
Yeah, because this was the vaccine that was fast-tracked.
Right.
The 3-year study turned into 15 months. Yeah, and they could have easily studied this and realized that 2 doses were enough and that spreading them out further was safer than grouping the second dose close together. And what do they do? No, they approve a vaccine, they release it to the population for everyone to use, and then they learn from their mistakes after the fact, after many people have been harmed. And to me, that's just a great shame. Just a quick overview of HPV. I mean, it's a virus. It causes genital warts. Very rarely it can help lead to cervical cancer, even maybe cancer of the penis. It's the most common sexually transmitted infection. And it's so common, and people kind of believe that if you've had, 5 or 6 sexual partners with, unprotected sex, we should, hopefully parents have known, to kind of turn down this part of the episode if you're listening to you with young kids. But then it's very likely you will catch HPV after you've had, a number of different partners. Interestingly, most people who catch HPV will not develop cancer. In fact, most people who catch HPV, you'll clear it. Your immune system will clear it out, and it'll eventually actually go away after some years. Some people will develop warts, but some people won't. And then basically, Pap smears is how you identify the virus. As far as the disease goes, they estimate maybe about 10,000 cases of cervical cancer come from HPV every year in the United States, and with about 3,500 fatalities. Those are just basically the main numbers that the CDC likes to use. I haven't been able to verify if those numbers are accurate or not. The HPV vaccine, it protects against the 2 main cancer-causing strains, but it protects against 7 other strains as well. Many of these that just cause warts, some of which may be linked to cancer. But the thing with this vaccine, though, is there are so many strains of HPV that it's not like you can get this vaccine and then go have all the unprotected sex you want, because you'll catch, other strains of HPV. You'll also catch, HIV, syphilis. What else is out there? Hepatitis B. Chlamydia, yeah. And this vaccine can cause some very severe side effects, very severe. And we're seeing that reported in the scientific literature more and more. So I think there's some significant safety concerns with this vaccine. But the thing is, it's a totally preventable disease, because you're going to need to make smart choices as a young adult to prevent all those other diseases. And so you're just preventing HPV, right along with preventing all those other diseases too. So if you're going to make smart choices as a young adult,
right,
you would not need...
Again, find the solution. The actual solution is not just covering it up with this one thing, because there are other things. The solution is the particular behavior, or from the inside out. How do you solve the problem for the greater...
Yeah. But I think we're going to see this vaccine added to mandates, to school mandates, which is going to be a real shame. And anyway, so I think there's definitely like a risk-benefit ratio with this vaccine that I think the vaccine itself does pose a lot of risk that I think parents need to be aware of, because, again, this is a completely preventable disease with wise choices. So that's the end of our disease episode. I had way more fun doing that than I thought I would at 7 in the morning.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that was going to be the next thing I was going to say. Thank you, Melissa, for being the vehicle of that fun. So, anyway, well, thanks you guys for listening. We'll wrap this up. Melissa is yawning, and so I'll keep talking until the yawn's over. And we will have another exciting episode coming up, and we will see you guys next time on the Vaccine Conversation.
The information in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as medical advice. Always consult your healthcare professional for information on vaccines and infectious diseases.